Welcome to the second part of the video on writing the problem statement section of a proposal or thesis. This video continues with how to establish research gaps and the writing of theoretical problems section. These are two of the many definitions of research. They imply that research is a process to advance our knowledge about a certain problem. Among the common features they share are the sequential steps for us to follow when conducting research. However, when solving a research problem, no specific solution is expected, since part of the solution is captured in the contribution to the body of knowledge. There are two types of research problem to be identified in basic research: the practical or managerial problem and the theoretical problem. While practical problem leads to practical contribution, theoretical problem results in theoretical contribution. To understand theoretical problem, we first need to understand the role of theory in research. Let's start with how the real-world problem or practical problem and theoretical problem are connected. Theory and practice is not detached, because theory can inform reality and reality can inform theory. Practical problem is connected to theoretical problem through different types of research: inductive research, deductive research, and abductive research. Inductive research is concerned with theory building. When there is a lack of existing theory that predicts and explains a particular behavior in the social world, the researcher collects data in the real world with the aim of building a theory. Deductive research is more suitable in situations when theory or theoretical concepts or perspectives already exist to explain specific behaviors in the social world. In such situations, the researcher formulates hypotheses with which to test the existing theory with the aim of modifying that existing theory in order to improve its predictive and explanatory powers. And abductive research adopts a pragmatist perspective to overcome weaknesses in the inductive and deductive approaches. Using an abductive approach, the researcher moves back and forth between the real and theoretical world in order to select the best explanation from competing explanations or interpretations of the data. Making an original contribution to knowledge very often incorporates a theoretical contribution. Given such a situation, researchers using quantitative approach need a theory related to the problem to provide a foundation and guidance for solution to the problem. Theory provides three important functions for quantitative research, including provision of a conceptual framework, serving as a medium for incorporating prior research, and linking research to the larger body of knowledge in the problem domain. While identifying a practical problem in a particular domain or organization is often not difficult, identifying theoretical problem from the literature may be challenging. Very often, it takes an extensive review of the literature to come up with a theoretical gap, or commonly called the research problem. From solving the research problem, new knowledge is expected to be created. This new knowledge refers to information not already present in the body of knowledge relative to a particular domain. However, this new knowledge would not be considered new if it was already present in the research literature of that domain. Therefore, for any PhD endeavor to be considered a research, it must be able to demonstrate identifiable new knowledge or research gap. In Chapter 1 of Research Proposal or Thesis, the problem statement is explicitly and elaborately discussed as research gaps. It explains the problem and justifies why the study is important. A good problem statement should explain how the research builds on existing theory or contributes to the development of a new theory and the likely use of the new knowledge. Therefore, a good statement of the research problem must integrate concepts and theoretical perspective of the literature. A research gap is said to exist when there is a real, identifiable conceptual connection between the problem in the literature and the research being conducted to address that problem. Without the conceptual connection, a researcher would be left with new insights from a random study rather than scholarly work. For a viable and well-grounded research work, researchers should provide a yes answer to one or more of the following questions regarding filling the research gap. Can a known gap in the body of knowledge be filled? The research gap found in the literature should be fillable. Can previous research be replicated and expanded by looking at different variables, sample, and/or environment? Can previous research be expanded by carefully examining and integrating some identifiable aspects, for example, dimensions and measures? Are there documented problems needing the current available solutions? And is the theory that provides the foundation to your proposed study clearly understood? A well-formulated problem statement must also be able to address these 6 questions. The first being the question of what. A good statement of the research problem must clearly state what is the problem the research will address. Secondly is the question of who. The research problem must state some scholarly literature references that support the presence of that problem and describe the nature of their support. Third is the question of how. The research problem must describe the impact of the problem. Next is the question of where. The research problem must state who are affected by the problem. For example, is it a particular person, unit, group, organization, or society? The fifth is the question of when. The research problem, if necessary, must describe when the impact of the problem will happen as a result of time variation. And lastly, the question of why. The research problem must describe the underlying causes of the problem. The process of identifying research gaps or problems is said to be most challenging and important of the whole research process. But there are no hard or fast rules which students must follow to determine research gaps. However, There are some guidelines or activities for identifying and determining a research-worthy problem. These activities include personal observation, literature search, literature mapping, synthesizing the literature, consulting with experts, presenting research ideas, and participating in related research activities that can help develop your research skills. Some people are first motivated to do research as a result of their personal interests, hunches, and feelings. In most cases, problem starts with vague or unsystematic thoughts and undergoes a series of refinement steps. In a more scientific way, problems could be observed in any domain of interest through scholarly conferences and/or observation of phenomena. This shows that a research gap cannot be determined in a vacuum. It must start with some observed problem. Personal experiences of the researcher may also provide good insight into the possible research problems. For example, a PhD research in management may start with simple observation of employee behavior regarding work attendance, which may lead to observing and increasing incidences of coming late for work and absenteeism. Personal experiences alone does not completely justify the need for research, nor does it create a research gap. There is always a likelihood that a number of solutions to the observed problem are already documented in the literature. Therefore, the problem must be anchored in the context of the existing body of knowledge, that is, the literature. Since research problem originates from theoretical knowledge of a research domain, having a sound theoretical knowledge about the research domain is necessary to propose possible solutions to a practical problem. Extensive reading of scholarly articles is another important step in identifying problem or gap to fill. Read scholarly literature in leading journals, standard conference proceedings, and renowned scholars in the domain. Observe the variables were already used to solve the problem to avoid reinventing the wheel. Referring to suggestions for future studies is another excellent approach. Literature map helps identify issues such as relevance and connections among studies in terms of ideas, variables, context, methodology, findings, and future direction. A well-designed and comprehensive literature mapping allows understanding of opportunities and potentials for viable theoretical contributions. Also, a good literature mapping helps you in synthesizing your literature, thus helping in the overall writing of literature review chapter. While there is no one best way to create literature mapping, it broadly facilitates identifying key issues or aspects across the literature, and then create a table that fits the key issues or aspects found in the literature. A synthesis is a concise summary of the literature review from different but related sources composed into a generalized statement to form a connected whole. Why must the review of the literature be synthesized? because the research gap cannot be established using a single source. And since it is unlikely that the findings of two or more authors would be similar, the research gap must be established by integrating outputs derived from a number of previous studies, that is, by synthesizing the literature. A synthesis of the literature would create an integrated literature that would be far superior than the total review of individual articles brought together. Once a research gap or problem has been identified, you can get feedback from domain experts. Feedback on the potential research gap can be done using two main approaches. The first is by seeking feedback from available, experienced, and active researchers. You may also obtain feedback simply by asking your supervisors questions such as, is the established problem adequate for PhD research? And how can this proposed gap be improved further? Once you have identified the gap or problem, you are encouraged to take steps to publish your initial research efforts by making presentation in a recognized colloquium or conference. The conference or colloquium proceedings or journal publication that follows the presentation is an important step in establishing the research gap as well as strengthening it in the selected research domain. Specifically, presenting the research problem in a conference or colloquium serves four important functions: to gain feedback on the viability and improve the research framework. Once your framework becomes established, it is placed in the global data bank. To protect your ideas and proposed framework from being duplicated in the future. Likewise, if you delay publishing the research framework, you may find your proposed research framework published by someone elsewhere, thus invalidating or reducing the strength of the research problem. You can enhance your research skills by joining development programs in the form of workshops, seminars, discussion group, and other doctoral support training often organized within or outside university campus. These events can help you better understand and frame your research problems and issues. For novice researchers, meetings with the supervisors or simply attending the formal PhD classes is not enough to equip you with the required skills. By interacting, networking, and collaborating with peers and experts in various informal academic groups, you benefit from being kept updated about issues and problems in your research domain. Not only must the research gaps be identified well, they must be articulated convincingly as well. A well-articulated research gaps would convince the readers that the proposed study is unique and original, not a mere duplication of a research that was already done before. It implies that you have a deep knowledge of the topic. At the same time, you will be able to emphasize the novelty of your research well. Thank you for watching. If you find this video useful, please subscribe, comment, and share so that more of similar videos can be presented.